And I think that that's one of the things as caregivers that we look back on, and hindsight is 2020. I should have known this. I should have been able to do that. But you don't know when you're in it. And I think that's something that for a lot of us, that's really hard to forgive yourself for.
Welcome to Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast, a sacred space where we celebrate the grit, grace, and gut honest stories behind caregiving and healing. Here, we believe in showing up with our full hearts, even when they're bruised. Today's guest? Well, she's not your typical therapist. We're honored to welcome Caroline Kobylinski, MA, MMFT, LPC-S, LCDC, EMDR Certified, and ART Certified, a trauma therapist, truth teller, and healing space holder for those carrying heavy stuff most people don't talk about. Caroline is the one people call when they've stopped believing therapy can help. Through CWK counseling, she merges clinical skills with raw lived experiences, walking alongside people, navigating addiction, eating disorders, dysfunctional family patterns, grief, and trauma. Her spaces, whether virtual or in person, are where you can cry, cuss, laugh, and finally exhale. Caroline's story is deeply personal. She's moved through her own mental health battles with bipolar 2, eating disorder recovery, and a wrestling match with faith. She also stood fiercely beside her sister in law, Jenny, during her battle with stage 4 breast cancer. A caregiving chapter marked by profound love, devastating loss, and spiritual reckoning. All of it, the clinical, the spiritual, the deeply human, informs the way Caroline shows up in the world today, fully, honestly, and without fluff. Whether she's offering trauma healing through tools like EMDR, ART, and the Enneagram, or bringing iced coffee and neon Birkenstocks into session, she makes healing feel possible and deeply human. Pull up a chair. This conversation is a mirror for anyone who's been carrying more than they know how to name. Let's get into it. Welcome to Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast family. I am incredibly excited to have Caroline Kobylinski on today. Caroline Kobylinski is a therapist, and we're going to have a dynamic conversation. This is going to be a great discussion on today, so get ready. And with that said, let's get right on into it. The title of this episode is called The Therapist Who Tells the Truth: Trauma, Burnout, and Healing Without the Fluff. So, everyone, please welcome Caroline Kobylinski.
Yes, I feel like the most important thing is there's no fluff around here.
Yeah.
That's my kind of claim to fame, is that I'm very funny and I have zero fluff. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Yes, well, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to come on to just share some of your wisdom with the podcast family on today and your experience. So I'm really excited about that. So please, Miss Caroline, please tell me about yourself.
Okay, so I am a therapist in Richardson, Texas, which is right outside of Dallas. I have been in practice for about 10 years. I specialize in eating disorders, trauma. I'm trained in 2 different trauma modalities. And as of the last couple of years, I've started to specialize in grief and caregiver burnout. So I guess I'll just dive right into my story. So I got married in 2018, and my husband's family are a lot different than my family. My family is very loud, and we're like all in each other's grill, like all the time. And his family is not like that whatsoever. So my sister-in-law, Jenny, we became fast friends. We're very alike. And in 2019, she was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. It had already, she had had the lump for a while and didn't do anything with it. because that's just the sort of things that she did. And so by the time she went in and got everything, I mean, it was pretty far advanced. And so she started treatment in 2019, and then the whole gong show of 2020, COVID happened, and some stuff happened in our family that we didn't kind of talk for a couple of years. And so during that time, because it was during COVID, she experienced like all of that by herself. It still breaks my heart to think about her being in the hospital by herself. One of the immunotherapies that she did messed up her liver. And so her liver enzymes were all messed up, and she had to be in the hospital by herself. When she had the double mastectomy and the spacers put in and all that stuff, her wound got infected and she had to have a wound vac and a nurse coming. I mean, this whole time she's there by herself. And it was horrific. And in 2022, her cancer returned and metastasized to her lungs. And I still remember exactly where we were when she told us. And it was at that point that she welcomed us back into relationship with her. So after that, I mean, it was kind of status quo. We did a lot together just because we live in the same town and I like to be with my family. And so, but in 2023, trying to think of how it all happened. So from being on the immunotherapy, that messed up her lungs or her liver and her heart. And so she had to get, because of what it did to her heart, there's so many pieces to this. I'm trying to like piece through kind of chronologically what happened. So at some point in 2023, we ended up in the ICU because her heart, she had myocarditis, and so the immunotherapy that she had done had weakened her heart muscles. And so that was the first time I think that we were ever in the ICU. And so that she was extremely, extremely claustrophobic. And so doing any kind of scan or anything, it was a nightmare. I mean, like to say it was a nightmare is like an understatement. And so I guess after the first time that she was in the hospital and we were back in relationship together, I saw what a gong show it was when she was in the hospital. I come from a medical family. I thought that I wanted to be a nurse. I did a semester of nursing school, decided, in fact, I did not want to be a nurse. But so I know how to advocate for people. I know how the hospital system works. I know what you need to do. And her family did not know that. And so she really just wasn't getting good care. And so after that, I started being the hospital buddy and the doctor's appointment buddy and all of that kind of stuff, just because, along with having no fluff, I'm also not afraid to ask anybody anything. So that happened in 2023. And that was the first time that we were in. She ended up having a heart cath done because she was so flipped out, or a heart biopsy done because she was so flipped out about going into the MRI machine. I mean, that's the level of claustrophobia. So then that summer, she ended up with DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis. She had to get on steroids to help her heart, and that ended up unmasking type 1 diabetes. And so that happens a lot with steroids. A lot of times that's how people find out they are diabetic, because it makes your blood sugar so high. And so she she is the most stubborn person that I've ever met. I don't know if you know anything about the Enneagram, but she is an 8 on the Enneagram, and 8s are a force to be reckoned with. And so she had actually fallen earlier that week and didn't tell anybody. And so my husband Ken went to her house because her dad couldn't get her on the phone. And when he got there, she was really out of it and pretty delirious, which is what happens when your blood sugar is in the 500s. So we got her to the hospital, and it took a while for them to figure out what was happening, that it was her blood sugar that was so high. And also, she had horrifically broken her leg earlier in the week when she fell And she is such a ridiculous person that she walked around on a broken leg for 5 days. Yes, ridiculous. She is the most hard-headed person I have ever met in all of my life, and the reason that she lived so long is because she was such a fighter. Those 8s on the Enneagram are a force to be reckoned with, and that is, I mean, she didn't wanna die, and she wasn't gonna do it, and so then that kind of complicated everything, and she was still on the steroids, and her blood sugar, my sister and my dad are type 1 diabetics, and so I have a very good knowledge of diabetes and how you keep your blood sugar intact and do all those things. Jenny was a horrific patient, and so she didn't do any of the stuff that she was supposed to. She didn't eat like she was supposed to. She didn't keep her blood sugar in check. Like she was a horrible patient. And so she was just stubborn, and her stubbornness is what carried her through the whole thing. So, I mean, that's a whole part of caretaking that happens is you have to take into account the personality of the person that you're caring for, and also the dynamic that's happening there between you, because like if it's a family member, y'all have had a relationship all before this whole thing, and so if there's strains there, if whatever it looks like, whenever we're in stressful situations, we are not our best self. And so I think the main reason that I was able to be an advocate for Jen is because I was her sister-in-law, and she knew that I don't put up with any shit, and I was gonna between her and me, I don't know who was more stubborn. But so we spent a lot of time in the hospital in 2023 and 2024. In 2024, we were in the ICU less, but still quite a bit. And my husband's parents, their family, it's just really complicated, and kind of the family dynamic there that everybody played into, it just didn't end up being a great fit for them to come and do a bunch of stuff. It's not that they didn't want to, and not that they wouldn't have, and they did come. It was a really complicated ordeal. So it was kind of Jen and my husband Ken, they're Ken and Jen, Kenny and Jenny. And it was really kind of the three of us against the world. We did chemo dates. We spent the night at her house. I mean, we did that a lot. Ken would be there during the day and I would be there at night. So, like chemo dates, we would either get Uber Eats or we'd stop and pick up food on the way, and we'd all scroll on our phones and watch whatever CSI or crap TV was on in the infusion room. So it was kind of all of us against the world. And it was a really, really, really precious time. It was horrific, and it ended in her death. But those memories, now that I've worked through them enough, I can remember the good things and not just the bad stuff. And so that's another part of my story. A lot of therapy, a lot of therapy. So, and she passed away in November of 2024 at 9:21 p.m. And I sat next to her until the funeral home came. My husband said that it was about 2 hours, and I just sat and held her hand and kissed her forehead. I'm so sorry. I didn't think I was going to get so.
It's okay. It's okay.
So, the second half of 2024 was pretty bad. The last about 6 weeks of her life, we were in the hospital almost every weekend. And so her parents were kind of in and out, and we would take turns being at the hospital. She's always been a nervous sleeper. And so one of the things that she was really afraid of was being out of control. And so nights in the hospital were really, really, really hard because she was afraid if she closed her eyes that she wouldn't wake up. And also for the last 6-ish weeks, she was on oxygen, and that was kind of a bigger deal than any of us thought that was going to be. And sorry, I'm skipping around. She had a pleural effusion. I think that's what it was from all the stuff with her lungs. And so she had a Pleurex drain that we drained every Ken I would go every morning and we would drain it. Sometimes we would drain it at night too. And Ken would drain it and do all that stuff. And then I would put the bandage on. So before they figured out what that was, they laid her down and she wasn't able to breathe. And so after that, she couldn't lay down at all. I mean, kind of the furthest back that she would go was maybe that. And so when she was at home, before I would put her to bed every night, we'd get all her pillows and all the things and get that all sorted out. But in the hospital, she was a terrible patient because she didn't want to take her meds. And so at night, it was just horrible. I had to do some therapeutic work on night stuff after she passed away. It was just, and I was always the one there at night. And so it was just really, really hard. And so the last 6 weeks were pretty horrible. She got on hospice. It was a huge deal for her to go on hospice because she just didn't want to do it because she didn't want to die. And so she went on hospice, and that was so helpful. We got a hospital bed and all of that stuff. At some point, we got a bedside potty. So her tumors metastasized to her brain, and that happened really before we knew that that's what it was. And so she had started having these little focal motor seizures where you're completely awake, but you're having a seizure. And so she had a full blown one of those the beginning of November, I guess. I think. Sorry, it all gets like so jumbled in your mind. You try to like think back through it because you're in such survival mode that you're like, hey, I got to get this done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So her body stopped working. And it started with her left leg. And by the time she died, her jaw had started seizing up that it was hard for me to give her meds every day. And so she was on a walker and we knew that her leg wasn't working, but none of us, like I said, I look back on it and you're like, well, how did we not know that? Like, what? And I mean, we just didn't know that because who thinks that? And I think that that's one of the things as caregivers that we look back on, and hindsight is 2020. I should have known this. I should have been able to do that. But you don't know when you're in it. And I think that's something that for a lot of us, that's really hard to forgive yourself for. So once she was on hospice, thank the Lord, really the first day that she was on it, the next day when the hospice nurse came by, she put a catheter in, and it was a lifesaver because she had become so immobile and so unsteady. She was a fall hazard. And so that was a game changer that we weren't having to get her up all night long back and forth and back and forth. And I mean, it was dangerous. And Ken and I didn't know what we were doing. I mean, we were like frickin' frack in there doing whatever. And so the last 2 weeks were really, really precious moments. There was a lot of heartache and a lot of grief and a lot of trauma that happened during then. And it wasn't until I was able to really kind of thaw out and work through it that I was able to see how much that really was. And so the thing about Jenny was she didn't trust very many people, and she had total trust in Ken and I. And that is the most precious gift outside of my salvation. That is the most precious gift I will ever have. And for somebody that is as tough as she is to trust you like that, it's pretty mind blowing. So the last 2 weeks were bad. The last week was really bad. She was completely immobile at that point, and so I would stay during the night and Ken would be there during the day. He'd get there about 10, and then I guess before she got completely immobile, he would bring like Whataburger, breakfast tacos, or there was this other place that we got tacos from all the time. And so we would eat together every morning and we all ate together every night. And so then I would get her kind of ready for the day, brush her teeth, put her contacts in, do her meds, all that kind of stuff. And then I would go to work. And so the last 2 weeks, I have no idea how this happened. Like, this is completely God's sustaining grace. I don't know how we paid our bills. I don't know how I kept clients. I mean, I have no idea because I was in and out of the office because we were in and out of the hospital, and then I was working out of her house, and I mean, it just I have no that is completely the grace of God that all of that happened. I still it's a blur, and but so Wednesday, before she passed away on Sunday, I was on with a client and I heard, I don't know if she yelled or what, but I was like, hey, I got to go. And so I went in there and Ken was on one side of her hospital bed. And I came in and I was like, hey, Jen, what's going on? And she was so afraid. And so Ken and I just sat there and held her hands for like the rest of the afternoon and just told her it was okay. We got her to That's a whole other like figuring out how to keep your loved one comfortable in this whole thing. That's like a shit show and of itself of like getting we had a lot of problems with that. But so we got her in her chair and I just sat next to her and I held her hand all afternoon while she watched Elf and slept. And again, for somebody to love you like that and trust you like that, I mean, and don't get me wrong, it wasn't all rainbows and daisies. I mean, one time when we were in the hospital, Ken was up there and I was like, okay, I'm getting my stuff together. And Jenny was like, tell her to don't come. We don't need any more fucking martyrs. And I was like, okay, first of all, I am coming. I mean, it wasn't like the whole thing was just seamless. I have a big personality. Jenny had a really big personality. And so through all of the therapy that I have done, I'm able to look back on it as precious memories and also see the funny parts of things. And I didn't know that that was ever going to be possible. So the last couple of days were really bad. I think Ken's mom and sister got there on Thursday or Friday, and we were all just kind of taking turns being there. I would go home and kind of chill out for a little bit and then come back and give other people a chance to go and do stuff. So it was a kind of just an all hands on deck at that point, and everybody just kind of doing what they could. So she had a seizure on Thursday night and she kind of really didn't ever wake up again. When we first got the white box from the hospice people, if you have used hospice, all about a white box. And so the first night she wouldn't take any of her meds. And she ended up having, oh my gosh, like it was I like don't even remember parts of it because it was so horrible. And she was afraid and she was yelling and she was agitated. And that was a lot of times what would happen at night. She'd be afraid and agitated and yelling. But that night it was like horrific. And so after that, she acquiesced to taking the amount of medication that hospice was directing. That made stuff a lot easier. So Thursday to when she passed away on Sunday. Sunday was a pretty peaceful day. A lot of her friends came over, and people were just kind of in and out of the house, talking with her and praying with her. And it's a really precious day. The house just felt like alive again. Like there was just like life and all these people telling stories about her. She was a great friend. I say that loving people is one of her superpowers. Everybody that met Jenny loved Jenny. And I'm not just saying that because she's dead. Like it's really true. She just saw people and she made people feel loved. And she was so thoughtful. She's one of the most thoughtful people that I have ever known. And so when people heard that they could come, I mean, people came. And it was really kind of a precious day. And so her dad finally got there on Sunday afternoon. And my husband and his sister and I went and had sushi at Jenny's favorite sushi place. And we came back and we're all just pretty quiet and just kind of sat until she went. And for the next week, we went to the funeral home on Monday morning and I helped make those decisions. And after that, I was like, I am out. I am tapped out. I've got nothing left. We went over to the house to start cleaning stuff out with Ken's family. And I just sat on the couch. I was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do any of this. Like, I'm all used up. And I didn't. I just sort of really drew inward and my world got very, very small for a while. And it was just what I needed to be able to start healing. Being a therapist, I knew the different trauma modalities that were out there. I was seeing my therapist and Ken was seeing his therapist every week the whole time we were caring for her. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. I mean, there's traumatic stuff that happens, and then you're also just tired, and everybody gets sick of each other. And I mean, they're just,
It's
yeah,
great that you said that because so many people don't know that they should be undergoing therapy while they are taking care of their loved ones as a caregiver, and they don't know and or understand the benefits of doing so. Like for an
yeah,
example, when I went through my situation with my beloved mother, stage 4 breast cancer, I mean, that's why I was over here just shedding tears as well because
no,
I resonate with you 110%. And when you're in it, you're in it, and
yeah,
things are happening. You're trying to stay afloat of everything. I was still working. I was taking care of my mother. I was averaging 2 hours of sleep. I was having a house built for her as a gift. So all of
wow,
these things I'm managing. I moved her down south to be with me. So all of these things. But I didn't know that, like, hey, Talisa girl,
yeah.
hey,
You need help.
help. Like, stop trying to be so strong.
Yeah,
And it's okay to seek out therapy because this is the time where it's needed. So, podcast family, hearing that Caroline is a therapist and she's a therapist, not only was she a therapist, but she also took out the time to undergo therapy while she was taking care of her loved one as a caregiver
yeah,
is something that really helped. And it's something that I'm sure that we both agree others, yeah,
1000%.
others should be doing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, God bless COVID and telehealth because there were some days that I went into my little office, which was her guest room, and I would see my therapist from there, or I would go sit on the front porch in the rocking chair and talk on the phone or get on my phone and Zoom from there. So, I mean, there's ways to do it. And I think it's really, really important to care for yourself along the way and to find a therapist that has a specialty in grief, in caregiving, because unless you've been through this, you it is just daylight and dark with the ability to do it. And so to have a therapist that can help you with that specifically, I think is so incredibly important. And even if they haven't been through it themselves, having an understanding, having the training to work through grief, work through the burnout, work through all of the dynamics that go with it. I mean, it just, yes, that would be my advice. Find a therapist and find somebody that knows what they're doing in this particular arena.
Absolutely. So you said that you went through this process of being a caregiver and that you had help with Ken, which is Ken is your husband, correct?
Yes, yeah,
Okay. So your partner was able to really help step in and you two came up with a game plan
absolutely.
to help out. How did you work that out?
We're a really good team. We started marriage counseling in October before we got married in March. And then we went faithfully our whole first year. And we would go check in once a month with our couples therapist during all of this. Cause that's one thing that happens is caregiving can ruin relationships. Everybody's so stressed out. Nobody understands what's happening. So that was another thing that we were really purposeful about is making sure that we were staying in contact with each other. And I think that that's such a great question. Sitting here thinking about it, I think that we both have strong suits, and recognizing those pretty early on and knowing each other's limitations, I think that was huge. Huge, huge, huge. Ken would be there all day, and sometimes he would say, "Hey, I need you to come earlier." And I would finagle my schedule around to figure out how to do that because he was just pooped for the day and he needed to eat dinner and go home and recharge. So I think making a game plan, a huge part of it, like most things in life, is about communication and letting people know before you reach the end of your rope that you're coming to the end of it. Because if you reach the end of your rope and you haven't alerted anybody to the fact that you're about to lose your mind, it's not going to go very well. So I think that's a huge one. And just checking in with each other, whoever your partner is, if you have one, whether it's a sibling or a spouse or a friend, whoever it is, to have that communication open there, I think is so incredibly important. And the other thing is, if you have support, use it. Don't be a hero. If you have people that want to bring you meals, let them bring you meals. If you have people that want to come over and clean your house, let them come over and clean your house. If you need an iced coffee, let them bring you an iced coffee. Like, people want to help you. People don't know what to do though. And so one of the things that I sat down and did at the beginning of this is wrote down kind of all the things that we did every day. And if anybody would ever ask me what they could do, I would take a picture of the list. Finally, I typed it in my phone and I would just text it to people and say, "This is what we're doing today. If you want to help with any of these things, let me know and I'll mark it off." So, having a little bit of foresight, I think, is also really helpful because, like I said, people want to help. They don't know what to do, though. And when you are in the middle of the fire, you're like, "Don't fucking ask me how to help me."
Right.
Don't ask me any more questions.
Right. Absolutely. That's key, podcast family. Number one, you know what your daily life looks like. You know what you undergo through every day. So making a list and then doing something as simple as putting it in your phone so that when loved ones reach out to you who want to help, and keep in mind that people want to help. You're not alone. So you don't have to bear everything on your shoulders alone. But
Yeah.
when people reach out, they want to help, but they don't know how to. So if you already have done the work, you have a list and you know what you usually do and what you could use help with, depending upon how your day and or week is going,
Mhm.
you can then ask that loved one for help within the categories that are needed. Like you
Yeah.
said, that's a wonderful tip.
The other thing that I would say is you need to figure out some way that you can get out of wherever you are for a little bit every day, whether it's to go on a walk or to just sit outside somewhere. Getting outside is really, really, really important if you can, and putting your feet in the grass. The studies that have shown what grounding does for people and their mental health, it's huge. And so getting out, go get a Diet Coke from Sonic, go get a cup of coffee, like whatever your thing is, like go do that. And in asking for help, if there's a time of day that your loved one does pretty well, I would schedule the time to leave during that time. Give them the plan of, this is, if this happens, blah, 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 shoot me a text. I'm not that far away. But having something for yourself every day is really, really important. And if that means that you buy your own gel, your shower gel, and your own lotion, and you take a shower there every day with like your own kind of loofah and your own shower gel or soap or whatever it is, if you like your towels better, use those. If you like your laundry detergent better, you're the one doing the laundry. Use your laundry detergent. But it's little things like that that just bring about a little bit of normalcy. And Those things seem little, but I can remember at the end, I was going back to our house to shower every night. And finally, I was just like, I don't have time for all this. And so I ordered the shower gel that I have, and I just kept it in the bathroom. And it was like, then it wasn't a deal. If I needed to shower, I could jump in the shower and be back out in 10 minutes. And I did. I brought our laundry detergent and we used it there. Like when I restocked the thing on Amazon, I got all the stuff that we like because Jenny was out of it and she didn't know, and I was not out of it, and I have an opinion. And so I have an opinion about a lot of things. But it's stuff like that that you don't think about. Also, learning how to advocate for yourself in the hospital. It is your job to get on Chat GPT and learn everything you can about your loved one's deal, because they cannot advocate for themselves, and nobody should be in the hospital by themselves because they will not get good care. So Chat GPT has been huge. I have a client whose partner was just diagnosed with stage 4. And so we just got in my office, I just looked stuff up and he was like, "You found all that on Chat GPT?" I was like, "Yes." So, and it can break it down for you really simply. You can ask it, what would be helpful to have in a hospital bag? One thing that we always had with Jen is we always had a go bag. So and we ended up just starting to take it with us to every doctor's appointment she went to. It had two pajama sets for her. It had like hygiene stuff, a phone charger, a computer charger, a set of meds for a week, her contact stuff, like everything that she would. I mean, it took us a while to figure that one out, but we were all very happy after we did that. Because then you didn't have to think about it. You could just call and be like, "Hey, the black and white bag is by the back door. Can you just get that and bring it up here?" And then nobody had to search through the house and find, "Oh, are these the right leggings? Is this t-shirt too tight? Is this one okay?" Because that person your loved one has gotten to go through and pick out their own stuff. And
Right.
so when they get to the hospital, when they get to PT, when they get to wherever they are, they have what they wanted.
To just piggyback off of that, perhaps keeping it in the car or in the trunk of the car. So then
Yeah.
that way, if you have a lot going on, which again, as a caregiver, we have a lot going on, you don't have to worry about, oh, well, I forgot the bag, our
Yes.
go bag. It's already there in the car. So everything is in one place
Mhm.
whenever you need it.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great information.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there was anything else that she had a lot of stomach stuff just because she was on chemo until the very end. So, figuring out what worked for her system, we had prescription strength Zofran and prescription strength anti-diarrhea stuff, knowing her system and how we needed to dose that. I mean, just because with chemo, bless their hearts, they feel bad all the time and their stomach is jacked up all the time. Like the rest of us do. Like when we get a stomach bug, we're all like, "Well, this is it. I'm going to die." And so to feel like that all the time, really paying attention and getting that down and having a system and writing it down. So if anybody else, that's my huge thing. Write it down. Make a list, put it in your phone, save it in your notes, and then you can copy and paste that to whoever is there. Another thing that we did, I went through and got all of the phone numbers that I could possibly need out of her phone and saved them as Jenny, blah, blah, blah. And so I could, and then put like a whatever it is to say who it was. So I had all the phone numbers that I was ever going to need before she ever even stopped being able to use the phone. And this is stuff that you don't like. I wouldn't know any of this stuff except for we did it and we kind of figured it out along the way. So figuring out meds, also figuring out the stuff that you like. What do you like to eat? Because you're there and you're going to be there. Like, don't, don't like sell yourself short of what you need to like feel good in your own skin. That would be a huge one. Uh,
That goes right back into self-care, and you touched on self-care throughout this process, and you said make sure you go outside or stand in the grass or go and get that soda or that iced coffee. That matters. Those simple things, it matters. It'll help you continue to move forward.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast, where we hold space for the real, raw, and redemptive moments of caregiving and healing. In part one of our conversation with Caroline Kobylinski, MA, MMFT, LPC-S, LCDC, we began peeling back the layers of trauma, burnout, and what it truly means to heal without the fluff. The conversation had to pause. Why? Because in true therapist fashion, Caroline had a client session to honor. Now, in part two, we're diving back in with even more truth, laughter, and soul work. If you're navigating trauma recovery, emotional fatigue, or just trying to keep your head above water, this episode is for you. Let's pick up where we left off with honesty, heart, and healing. Let's get into it. Well, welcome back, Caroline. How are you today?
I am great. The weather has finally changed here in Texas, and so I'm getting to wear cooler clothes, which is pretty great for it being November.
You know what? I hear you. It's been pretty cold here in good old Myrtle Beach. Abnormally cold. I want to say it's in the 40s, and I have on a sweater today, as you can see. I really appreciate you coming back on to talk about being a caregiver, your experience, and the knowledge and expertise you have as a therapist. I know some time has passed since we've gotten together in the first episode. So, where we are at now, for an example, the holiday of Thanksgiving has just passed.
Hmm.
We are now transitioning into Christmas and New Year's. In addition to that, as a caregiver, you have experienced the first year anniversary
Hmm.
of your sister-in-law's passing.
Yeah.
So I like to share with the podcast family your experience during your journey as a caregiver, dealing with grief, the first year anniversary, the holiday that has just passed, Thanksgiving, and your current plans for Christmas and New Year's, etc.
Yeah. So the 24th of November, yeah, it's already December. Oh my gosh. The 24th of November is when she passed away. And really, it took my husband and I completely by surprise. When the weather changed here about the middle of October, it hit us like a ton of bricks. And I don't think either of us really knew what we were gonna feel like, but it was completely shocking the way that it hit us. And so there were good days and there were hard days. When it finally approached on the 23rd, actually, we both had that was on Sunday, and both had a really, really hard day because we were remembering what all was happening that day, specifically of her going through the whole day, even though the anniversary wasn't until the next day. That Sunday was when everything was so bad. So that was a really hard day, lots of tears. And then on Monday, we went to her favorite Tex-Mex restaurant and took her in her little urn, because sometimes we just like to take her places, and went and had Mexican food, and they have these special margaritas called Mambo Taxis. And so that's what we did to celebrate that day. And so the day really wasn't, I worked all day and I hadn't kind of put all together that because it was the week of Thanksgiving. So I hadn't put together all of that. And so I don't know if it would have been better for me to take the day off. I guess we'll see next year. But it was really different than I think either me or my husband had thought that it was going to be. And then Thanksgiving, it was just really weird and quiet. We went to my husband's family. They live south of us in Austin, Texas. And Jen was just really, she had so much energy and she just carried the room. And so had so much anxiety leading up to the week, or leading up to Thursday, because she and I were the ones that kind of made it happen and planning the food and all of the activities that we were going to do. And she wasn't here. And it was really strange. I had to do a lot of therapeutic work around my husband's family just because of kind of the way that everything went down with caring for her. And so leading up to Thanksgiving, I didn't even really know what that was going to look like for me as far as where I was in my own grief journey. And so I did a lot of really intentional accelerated resolution therapy. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit because that has been life changing for me. But I did rally and we did the things. We weren't there for very long. We just went on Wednesday evening and were there on Thursday and came back Friday morning. I think that's one of the things that's been surprising is this has all felt really personal, just as far as our story and sharing the grief that we have experienced in this 1 year. And usually I'm really open and am a pretty good communicator, but that hasn't really been kind of the story for this period of time, which I think is kind of interesting. And I think that's the crazy thing about grief is we never know what it's going to be like. And grieving her while it was all happening so much, but then also as a caregiver, being so caught up in the day to day of everything. Like you don't have time to have a meltdown because you're like taking care of this person that needs you. And so, one of the things that has been that I was thinking about the other day, I still have her text name pinned at the top of my text messages on my phone. I haven't deleted her out of my favorites. I haven't deleted any of the contacts that I had for her while we were caring for her. The alarms are still in my phone that we set for the lorazepam and the morphine. So it's like that kind of stuff that I don't know if I'll ever be able to delete those things. I mean, maybe I will, but like right now, that doesn't feel like anything that I'm ready to do. And I think as a caregiver and on this grief journey, like they're just, and you know this from caring for your mom, like there's just kind of these weird things that you don't really think about that are still part of the way that you're carrying them with you. So, I mean, that's kind of where we are right now.
I appreciate that because that's very honest, that's very transparent, and it's also very vulnerable for you to share that because you're a therapist. You can easily come on and say, "Oh, well, I as a
Yeah.
therapist, I know this and I've done this and so I never." But you're being very honest and just very vulnerable. And to your point, that's very true. There are things that I'm sure I'll never get rid of. For an example, my mother's phone number, although it's no longer her phone number anymore. And I was made aware of that when I received a notification on Snapchat that I had a new potential contact and it was her
Oh
phone
my
number.
gosh.
Yeah. That was hurtful. But
I
it
can imagine.
yeah, but to your point, like life doesn't stop.
Mhm,
Time doesn't stop.
mhm,
And the phone number that she once had, although it's programmed in my phone under mom, has now been given to someone else to use.
mhm.
And it's okay.
Yeah,
However, I still have that number in my phone saved as mom, and that's something I'm quite sure I'll always hold on to.
yeah. It's stuff like that that it's, I mean, I don't, and I think that's the part of grief that people don't like. I don't know if they don't prepare you for or if it's stuff that people don't think about, but it's stuff like that. It's the phone numbers. It's just kind of these weird little everyday things that I think that's kind of the interesting part of all of this to me has been those little things over the last year.
Right, absolutely. So, as it pertains to advice and some just some best practices as a therapist to give to the caregivers who are now on Well, the grieving journey starts at different stages. I
Yeah.
began grieving as soon as I found out about my mother's diagnosis.
Mhm.
And now I realize that I should have had a therapist then.
Mhm.
I didn't know. I was trying to be strong and trying to take care of everything. And as it pertains to my culture, as a as a Black Mexican American Christian on both sides of my family, that was just something that was taboo. So
Yeah.
I didn't know that I needed that.
Right.
However, I needed it.
Yeah.
So and having you on is great. What are some best practices or things that can help people as they're on their grieving journey, and no matter where they're at, whether they're at the beginning and taking
Yeah.
care of a loved one or at the end of their experience taking care of their
Mhm.
loved one?
Yeah, so I think therapy is really important. That was something that my husband and I were both really intentional about. We've both been in a lot of therapy, but we were very intentional about keeping those appointments, making sure that even if we were in the hospital, stepping out for the 50 minutes and making sure that we were really taking care of ourselves during that time. And I think that a lot of times people feel like I don't have time to do that. And really, if we're not, the best practice is taking that time, taking that 50 minutes every week or every other week to talk with somebody and make sure that you are processing your own stuff so that you have space to process theirs. And I think that that ties into physical health of caregivers. I think that when we take that time to really get intentional about our own needs, even if that's the only time that you do that all week, that the level of stress, the level of cortisol that's going through and adrenaline that's going through people when they're caregivers over a long period of time, that can really wear, well, it not just can, it does, it wears people out, and the sleep and all of that, and people get sick more quickly. And so the body keeps the score. And so if we are not tending to our mental health, it's harder. And if that was not the story that some people have, that they didn't like you, like that was just not part of your story, finding somebody as soon as you can that is a grief therapist, I think is really important. I do have a lot of transparency with my clients. That's just kind of who I am. I look the same when I'm going to church on Sunday as I do when I'm sitting with my clients. And so that has been really helpful to me to be able to do that with my clients. And it's been really helpful to them for as I have started doing more grief work with people, to be able to share that with them and to normalize things. And so some people, that's not what they want in a therapist. They don't want to hear anything about their therapist. They want to go in and do whatever. And that's why it's important to find the right therapist. So calling around, getting 10 or 15-minute consult and seeing kind of and asking that question, how much self-disclosure do you have? I think that's a really important one to know, because depending on your personality, that's what's going to help or not help. I think also in the grief journey, just being patient. The Our brains physiologically change with trauma. And so the things that people could do before there has been a significant trauma a lot of times changes. And so our neuropathways change, the things that keep us going back and forth. There are new neuropathways that develop because we are having to solve problems that we haven't ever had to before. I think that's a really big part of having a grief therapist that also is a trauma therapist, because all that gets tied up. If you don't have somebody that can help you piece that out, that causes problems physically, long term, and emotionally. And then both of those things work it out in your relationships. So, keeping in mind that grief, the process of grief is it's very strange, and sometimes feeling like all I can do is cry, and sometimes feeling like I don't think about this at all, and sometimes feeling like everything is too much and I can't do anything, I can't accomplish anything. A lot of times people, as they're grieving, will have ADHD symptoms, and so maybe following up on that and learning about that could be really helpful. Maybe getting on meds for a little bit while you're grieving could be helpful. I think that's meds have a real kind of back and forth kind of thing, and I'm not for or against them. I think that there's stuff that you can do physically to help with that stuff, but it also is a really big commitment. And so if you don't have the time or space to do that, then meds are the right thing. And you don't have to be on them forever. It can just be a short amount of situational time. But I think that can be really helpful to people too, just because there are neurological changes that happen when there is trauma and grief.
Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to go back to what you were talking about as it pertained to grief and changes in the brain. I've experienced that. And that's something which is very interesting because, again, this is before I knew about the changes in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
When I lost my mother, she had a heart attack. That's what ultimately took her out. But her body was shutting down though.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the room with her. I was in, at the time, my apartment. The house wasn't finished being built yet. So we were in the apartment. There were 2 nurses, there were 2 CNAs, and I had been called home because they said my mother wasn't doing well. And mind you, earlier in the morning, she was fine. And she literally said in the morning, she said, I thought about it. And I know I didn't fill out the paperwork, but if something happens to me, I want to be revived. I want to be here. That's what she said. I want to be here. So we're like, okay, and had all of that information. And then she ended up having a heart attack right then and there. I had already called EMS. And when that happened and going to the hospital, and I wrote all about it in my book called Mama Said Lessons on Life.
Mm-hmm.
There was something inside of me that just popped.
Yeah.
It popped. And I was just not the same. I will never be the same.
Yeah.
However, I was going through that, and that was before I had a therapist, and I really love my loved ones. Thank y'all for just the years of support, you all being there, because I just snapped, crackled, and popped.
Yeah.
Everyone. I really did, but I had to get to a place in therapy. I learned about the trauma. I learned about the changes in the brain. I learned about the anxiety that I've had since I was a little girl that I didn't know about. Even with that, my mother served as, anytime I had an anxiety attack, I would call my mom. Like, we talked several times a day, every day. And she used to say, oh, well, I had to talk to Lisa. She's on the edge. But she was always able talk to me and calm that. But when I lost her, I also lost that. So there were all these things that were going on and all of these changes in the brain. And I needed to talk to someone. I needed to start on that journey for mental health wellness. And it wasn't until, again, that I started on a path of therapy that helped me. So to know that when you all go through traumatic experiences, there is a chemical reaction.
Yeah, you're not just crazy. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So is there a way for it to ever go back, or is it forever changed?
I think it's just different. I think that it's just different because the law of action is what's done cannot be undone. And I think that we can go in and we can change and we can use that experience to serve us and to serve other people. I don't know that I ever think that people, after they experience something like that, I don't think that people can ever go back to the way that they were, because what has happened, and it changes us physiologically, it changes us emotionally, because it pushes us to a place that we didn't know we had. And so once those things happen, I don't think you can ever go back to that person that you were, because I don't think that person exists anymore. And I don't think that has to be a bad thing, but I do think that that's part of the grief process. Like that was huge for me, that I was so terrified of who I was going to become. Like that identity free fall, I had a lot of trouble with that because I didn't know who I was without being a caregiver. I didn't know what it looked like for the rest of my life. Was I going to be bitter and cynical? Was I going to be sad? Like, what was that? I was terrified of who that would be. And so that was a lot of work that I did in therapy of finding who that person was and is and has now become. And I think that can be really, really, it was really scary for me.
Yeah, I agree with you because I was there as well. Because to your point, when you go through something traumatic, you're not the same. Like I look at pictures prior to losing my mother and I'm like, yeah, that person is gone.
Yeah.
However, I'm a completely different person. But I learned that it isn't a bad thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I've grown emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and through, of course, through therapy. Oh, and I'm tearing up now. Through
Oh,
therapy, that's something that really helped me along my journey because when everything happened, I was lost. I was lost. So being who you were prior to the loss of your loved one or during your grieving journey, who you were before it started, know that it's okay. It's okay that you will change because the only thing constant in life is
it's
change.
change. Exactly.
And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It
Mhm.
can be a beautiful thing,
Yeah.
like a butterfly.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. That's a beautiful picture of that. Yeah. Grief has really changed my practice. The way that I interact with my clients has really changed. I have started specializing in grief. I'm about to start a grief, like a year-long grief course to get certified in some different things. It has very much grief and loss and caregiver grief and loss have become two of the things that I specialize in because those things are very different. Like working with the person who is experiencing dying is very different than working with the person that is the caregiver for the person dying. And so helping people kind of come to terms with that are two very different things that I think are both really important. And through all of this, that has become one of my specialties, just because I think that lived experience, you can't teach that. And so the heart behind that has really developed for me and how I work with clients and how clients find me.
That's beautiful because it opens the door for clients to be themselves, knowing
Mm,
that they don't have to put on a persona when they go into when they start therapy, when they meet you, they can
mhm.
actually be themselves.
Yeah.
We're all human and we are all having a human experience and life happens to everyone.
Yes.
It happens differently,
Hmm.
but it still happens. So being able to have that level of trust to know that they can be themselves
Hmm.
when they seek therapy is important. Yeah.
Another area that I've started that I've kind of been working through is working with couples that are experiencing not just so couples that maybe one of them is dying and the other one is the caretaker and what happens with all that because all those dynamics are still there, like regardless of whether or not your person is dying, the things that they do that irritate you are still there. And so if the marriage is not in a great place before then, all of that continues. And then for a couple that is caring for the same person, those things can make or break marriages. And so being really intentional about how you're caring for each other and working through that, even if you're just seeing a therapist every 3 or 4 weeks, like once a month, just to check in. That's another space that I have started to really think about and focus on.
As it pertains to where you provide therapy? Because I know you live in Richardson, Texas, as
Mhm.
stated. So you're able to provide therapy in Texas. But let's talk about the other states that you're available in.
Yes. So I am licensed in Texas and Arkansas and Louisiana and Alabama and Florida, and I'm working on Georgia, and then I'm also licensed in Colorado. One of the great things, I mean, the pandemic ruined a lot of things, but one of the things that came out of the pandemic is access to really good therapy through Zoom or Doxy or whatever, that even if you're not, you can see a therapist from another state, you can see a therapist from another place in your state. So telehealth has really brought therapy a long way, I think. Yeah.
I know you shared some new areas that you
Mm,
will be specializing in.
yeah.
What are the areas that you currently specialize in?
So I do a lot of life transition work, whether that is like I have some high schoolers that are on my schedule that we're trying to figure out what does college look like. I had a group of girls that I started working with while they were in college, and now they've graduated, they're in first jobs, empty nesters, people just getting older. That's a big one. I have a client on my caseload right now that is in their 70s, and the work that we have done is really grieving the loss of your body not doing what it used to, moving from your home to maybe a smaller home. I mean, life transitions are just, I think that we don't think about those and really needing therapy kind of through those. But all of life transitions are also grief, even if it's a good thing. Like I know when I got married, like love my husband. He's my favorite person ever. But it was also really hard. Like if I wanted to stay out till 11 o'clock at night and nobody knew where I was, like nobody cared. And now like I leave the house to go do something and he's like, hey, are you just are you leaving? And I'm like, no, I'm not because I have a husband. But it's life transitions. That is something that I really love working with. Trying to think what else that kind of pertains to a lot of different things, life transitions. I work with borderline personality disorder and narcissism. Those, as we have kind of figured stuff out, those are more on a spectrum because there's so much overlap that goes with them. And that's not, I don't want a whole case of borderlines and narcissistic people on my caseload, but I do really well with them just because I am straightforward and I'm so consistent. Another area that I am certified in two trauma modalities, EMDR and accelerated resolution therapy. And EMDR, people know, I mean, that's become very common. ART is like EMDR on steroids. It has been life changing. It is a much quicker process. Accelerated resolution therapy is. And so I have clients that are seeing other therapists that they'll come in and do an adjunct, 80-minute session with me and they'll clear out whatever and then they can go back to their regular therapist. You can look that up on my website, which you're going to put on there. You can also find it on acceleratedresolutiontherapy.com, and they have a list on there of you can find providers in your area or in your state so that you can do telehealth. But PTSD and complex PTSD are both, every therapist sees trauma. Not every therapist is a trauma therapist. And so as trauma therapists, we look at things really differently. And so making sure that whoever you are seeing is trained in trauma, I think is really important. Not all therapists are, and I think that's totally fine. But that is one of the places that I specialize.
Great. Let's talk about your website.
Okay. So that launched at the beginning of this year. I had a lot of big plans last year, and then kind of all the stuff with Jen went on. So once I started to come out of that fog in kind of February, I hired an SEO person, and it has been awesome. My website is cwkcounseling.com and has all the disorders that I treat. Also, kind of, I think that it gives a really good picture of who I am as a therapist and how I operate with my clients, just in the ways that I describe what different struggles are and the way that I interact with them. I feel like I have worked, well, I don't feel like I have worked really hard for my website to be a reflection of me. I think that a lot of times you get on people's websites and it seems really clinical. And my website is very pretty. I've worked very hard on it, but I do feel like it's a really good reflection of me and my personality and my approach to therapy.
Okay, great. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And podcast family, her website will be listed in the description of this episode. So please do not hesitate to reach out to Caroline. And again, she's located and provides services in Texas and
Well,
Alabama.
Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Colorado, Florida, and I'm working on Georgia.
Yep. So for the Georgia family, stay tuned because as
Yes.
soon as she is certified there, as soon as that information is available, that will also be listed on her website.
Yes. And one thing, so my TikTok and my Instagram are Bruised Banana. That is kind of my approach to life. Things happen and it's a big bruise, and you're like, oh, we're going to have to cut that out and like do some work. But then if bananas, like, not much has to happen before they're just a little bruised. And I feel like sometimes we look in the mirror and we're just like, I feel a little bruised by life. And so that's where Bruised Banana comes from. And so on my TikTok, less so on my Instagram, I post my like professional videos on my Instagram, but my TikTok has my professional ones and just kind of like daily counseling tidbits where I am in my grief journey. I cry on there a fair amount of time. I think it's really important to be authentic. And so, kind of what I'm seeing in my clients, what I'm working through in my own life, new things that I have thought about or figured out, that's the kind of stuff that's on my TikTok.
That's awesome. And I love the fact that by people following you, they get an opportunity to truly see who you are and that you keep it real. You're
Yes, I
very
do.
keep it real. And I love that. Absolutely love that. So thank you for that information. Podcast family, this information will also be in the description of this episode. So please ensure that you are reading through the description and that you follow Caroline. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This has just been, and part one, that was a little while ago and definitely at a different part of my journey than I'm at today. And so I love being able to come on and just kind of talk more about the clinical component of grief. And I think it's really awesome that you are giving your listeners kind of all the parts.
Yes, and thank you for that. And thank you for coming on to Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast as our specialist, as the therapist, as the human, and being open and honest and vulnerable and sharing your life experiences in addition to the professionalism and therapy that you provide, because this is needed. This is why I do this, is to help others. Thank
There's
you.
no there to me there is no wasted experience unless it doesn't help others. And so I think that it is not God's plan for your mom and Jenny to have gotten sick. That is not God's plan at all. We live in a fallen world where really bad things happen to really wonderful people, but God can work all those things together for the good of those
Yeah.
called according to his purpose. And so I think that being able to share our journey that's what brings honor to the Lord and to the people that we love.
Yes. Well, amen. Amen. You just spoke a whole word. You spoke a whole word. Yes. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
so
Thank
welcome.
All right, podcast family. Thank you for listening. Until next time.